Life presents us with challenges, decisions, and moments that often seem too overwhelming for us to handle. We grapple with uncertainties, weighed down by the burdens of our own expectations and desires. Yet, in the midst of this, there is a profound truth that we must hold on to leave it in God's hands. First and foremost, we must recognize that God's sovereignty is absolute. He is not surprised by the circumstances we face, nor is He limited by the constraints that bind us. When we trust in God's sovereignty, we acknowledge that His plans are perfect, even when we cannot see the full picture. To truly leave something in God's hands, we must be willing to surrender our will. This means letting go of our desires, our ambitions, and our control. It's a humbling act, but it is also a liberating one. When we surrender, we make room for God's will to be done in our lives. Faith is the key that unlocks the door to this surrender. Faith says, I trust you, God. Even when I don't understand it, it's faith that allows us to leave our burdens in His hands with confidence, knowing that He is working all things together for our good. But with faith must come patience. God's timing is not our timing. We live in a world that demands instant results, yet God often calls us to wait. In that waiting, we learn to trust deeper, to depend on Him more, and to see His hand at work in ways we could never imagine. Fear and anxiety are natural human responses to uncertainty. However, when we leave things in God's hands, we must let go of that fear. The Bible tells us, do not be anxious about anything, because God knows what we need even before we ask Him. Human understanding is limited, but God's wisdom is infinite. We often think we know the best course of action, but in reality, we can only see a small part of the puzzle. God sees the whole picture. By leaving it in His hands, we tap into His infinite wisdom, allowing Him to guide our steps. Jesus Himself gave us the ultimate example of surrender in the Garden of Gethsemane. Faced with the cross, He prayed, not my will, but yours be done. If the Son of God could surrender His will to the Father, how much more should we? Prayer is the tool by which we align ourselves with God's will. When we pray, we are not simply asking for what we want, we are submitting ourselves to God's plan. Prayer is the act of placing our concerns, our desires, and our very lives into His capable hands. And when we do, we experience a peace that surpasses all understanding. This peace is not the absence of trouble, but the assurance that God is in control, no matter what the circumstances may be. Finally, we must remember the testimonies of those who have seen God's hand move in miraculous ways. These stories remind us that when we leave things in God's hands, He works in ways beyond our comprehension, turning situations around for His glory and our good. So today, I urge you, whatever you are facing, leave it in God's hands. Trust His sovereignty, surrender your will, have faith, be patient, and let go of your fear. God is faithful, and He will handle it all in His perfect way. Trusting in God's sovereignty means recognizing that He holds supreme authority over all things, both seen and unseen. It's an understanding that God is not only aware of our circumstances, but actively involved in every detail of our lives. When we say that God is sovereign, we are acknowledging that He is the ultimate ruler, the King of Kings, whose power and wisdom far surpass anything we can comprehend. This trust is rooted in the belief that God's plans are always perfect, even when they differ from our own desires or understanding. It requires us to let go of the illusion that we are in control and to rest in the knowledge that God, who knows the end from the beginning, is orchestrating everything for our ultimate good. To trust in God's sovereignty is to believe that nothing happens by chance. Every event, every challenge, every blessing is part of a divine plan that is unfolding according to His will. Even when life seems chaotic or unjust, we can rest in the assurance that God is working behind the scenes, weaving together a tapestry that will ultimately reveal His glory and purpose. This kind of trust is not passive. It's an active decision to place our confidence in God's character. We trust that He is good, that He loves us, and that His intentions toward us are always for our benefit. It means believing that God's wisdom is far greater than our own, and that His timing, though it may seem delayed to us, is always perfect. When we trust in God's sovereignty, we are free from the burden of trying to control every aspect of our lives. We can approach each day with a sense of peace, knowing that we are not alone in our struggles. God is not only aware of our circumstances, but He is also guiding us through them. This trust allows us to face uncertainties with confidence, because we know that God is in control, and His plans for us are far better than anything we could plan for ourselves. In essence, trusting in God's sovereignty is about relinquishing our need to understand every detail of our journey, and instead embracing the truth that God's plans are perfect, His timing is impeccable, and His love for us is unwavering. It's a faith that says, I may not see the way, but I trust that God does, and that is enough. Surrendering your will is one of the most profound acts of faith and trust in God. It involves releasing your grip on your desires, plans, and ambitions, and allowing God's will to take precedence in your life. This act of surrender is not about giving up or resigning to fate. Rather, it is about consciously choosing to place your life in the hands of a loving and all-knowing Creator. When you surrender your will, you are acknowledging that God's plans for your life are far greater than anything you could design on your own. It's a recognition that His wisdom surpasses human understanding, and that His perspective is infinitely broader than ours. This surrender requires humility, as it means letting go of the need to control every aspect of your life and trusting that God's guidance will lead you to the best possible outcome. Surrendering your will also means letting go of the fears and anxieties that often accompany the desire for control. Fear is rooted in the unknown, in the uncertainty of the future. But when you surrender to God, you are choosing to trust that He holds your future securely in His hands. This trust dispels fear and brings a deep sense of peace, even in the midst of uncertainty. You no longer have to worry about every detail, because you know that God is in control. This act of surrender is not a one-time event. It is a daily choice to submit your will to God's. It requires constant vigilance to ensure that your desires and actions align with His will. It means being open to God's leading, even when it takes you in unexpected or challenging directions. Sometimes, surrendering your will may involve making sacrifices or letting go of things you hold dear. But it is in these moments that you grow closer to God and deeper in your faith. Surrendering your will to God also means being willing to accept His answers, even when they differ from what you had hoped for. It's easy to trust God when everything is going according to your plans, but true surrender is tested when His plans diverge from your own. In these moments, you are called to trust that God's way is better, even if you cannot see it at the time. Moreover, surrendering your will opens the door to experiencing God's power in your life. When you step back and allow God to take the lead, you create space for Him to work in ways that are beyond your ability. This act of letting go is an invitation for God to move in your life with His divine power and wisdom, accomplishing things that you could never achieve on your own. Ultimately, surrendering your will is about aligning your heart with God's heart. It's about wanting what He wants, loving what He loves, and allowing His purposes to become your purposes. This alignment brings about a transformation in your life as you begin to see the world through God's eyes and live in a way that reflects His love and grace. In surrender, you find freedom. Freedom from the pressure to have all the answers. Freedom from the burden of controlling your destiny. And freedom to live in the fullness of God's plan for your life. When you surrender your will, you are not losing control, you are gaining the assurance that the one who is in control has your best interests at heart. It is in this surrender that you find true peace, purpose, and fulfillment. Faith is a powerful force that has the ability to transform lives, situations, and entire destinies. It is the cornerstone of a relationship with God, the foundation upon which trust and surrender are built. When we speak of the power of faith, we are referring to a deep, abiding confidence in God's character, His promises, and His ability to do the impossible. Faith is not just a passive belief, it is an active trust that propels us to act even when we cannot see the outcome. It is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith moves us beyond the limitations of our natural understanding and into the realm of the supernatural, where God operates. It is through faith that we tap into the limitless power of God, allowing Him to work in our lives in ways that defy human logic and reason. When you have faith, you are essentially saying, God, I trust you more than I trust my circumstances, my emotions, or my understanding. This kind of faith empowers you to stand firm in the face of adversity, knowing that God is faithful and that He will fulfill His promises. It gives you the strength to keep moving forward, even when the path ahead is unclear or when everything around you seems to be falling apart. The power of faith lies in its ability to shift your focus from your problems to the one who holds the solution. Instead of being consumed by worry, doubt, or fear, faith anchors you in the assurance that God is in control. It reminds you that no matter how big the obstacle may seem, God is bigger. Faith is what allows you to face giants, walk through fire, and cross seas, believing that God will make a way where there seems to be no way. Faith also has the power to bring about change. Throughout the Bible, we see countless examples of how faith moved mountains, healed the sick, and raised the dead. It was by faith that Abraham became the father of many nations, despite his old age. It was by faith that Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, despite the formidable Red Sea standing in their way. These stories are not just historical accounts, they are testimonies of what happens when ordinary people put their faith in an extraordinary God. But faith is not just about seeing miracles, it is also about enduring trials. There will be times when faith requires you to hold on when everything in you wants to let go. It is in these moments of testing that the true power of faith is revealed. Faith doesn't always remove the challenge, but it gives you the strength to persevere through it. It is the inner assurance that even in the darkest of nights, God is still working and the dawn is coming. Moreover, faith connects you to God's promises. The Bible is filled with assurances of God's provision, protection, and guidance, but these promises are activated through faith. It is through faith that we claim the promises of God and see them come to fruition in our lives. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, because faith is what aligns our hearts with His will and positions us to receive His blessings. Faith also has the power to influence others. When people see the unwavering faith you have in God, especially in difficult times, it becomes a powerful testimony of God's goodness and faithfulness. Your faith can inspire others to trust in God and seek Him in their own lives. It becomes a beacon of hope, a light that shines in the darkness, pointing others to the source of true strength and peace. In essence, the power of faith is limitless because it is rooted in an all-powerful God. It is through faith that we access the fullness of God's promises and experience the miraculous in our lives. Faith doesn't just change our circumstances, it changes us, shaping us into people who reflect God's love, trust His plans, and walk confidently in His purpose. When you live by faith, you live in the power of God, and there is nothing that can stand in your way. Patience in waiting is a critical aspect of faith and trust in God's plan. It involves not just the ability to wait, but the grace and strength to wait well with a heart full of trust and a spirit of peace. Waiting can be one of the most challenging aspects of life because it often feels like a period of inactivity or even stagnation. Yet, in God's economy, waiting is never wasted time. It is a season where He is actively working, both in our circumstances and within us, preparing us for what lies ahead. In moments of waiting, it is natural to feel anxious, to want to rush ahead or to take matters into our own hands. However, true patience requires us to resist the urge to control the outcome and instead rest in the assurance that God's timing is perfect. God sees the entire picture. He knows the beginning from the end, and His timing is intricately connected to His purposes for our lives. What may seem like a delay to us is often a divine setup, aligning circumstances, people, and events in ways that are far beyond our understanding. Patience in waiting teaches us to depend on God rather than our own abilities. It strips away our reliance on immediate results and quick fixes, directing us instead to rely on God's wisdom and timing. This period of waiting is where our faith is tested and strengthened. It is in these moments that we learn to trust God more deeply, to lean not on our own understanding, but to acknowledge Him in all our ways, knowing that He will direct our paths. The waiting period is also a time of preparation. While we are waiting, God is often preparing us for what He has in store. This preparation can take many forms, refining our character, deepening our relationship with Him, or equipping us with the skills and wisdom we will need for the next season of our lives. Sometimes what we are waiting for is not ready for us, or we are not yet ready for it. Patience allows God to complete the work He is doing in us and our circumstances, ensuring that when the time is right, we are fully prepared to step into what He has planned. Furthermore, patience in waiting cultivates humility. It reminds us that we are not in control, that we cannot always dictate the timing or the outcomes in our lives. This humility is essential because it aligns our hearts with God's sovereignty, acknowledging that His ways are higher than our ways and His thoughts higher than our thoughts. In humility, we surrender our timelines and our expectations, trusting that God's plan is far superior to anything we could devise. Waiting also teaches us contentment. It is easy to become restless or dissatisfied when things don't happen as quickly as we would like, but patience allows us to find peace in the present moment. It encourages us to focus on what God is doing right now rather than being consumed by what is yet to come. This contentment is a powerful expression of faith, demonstrating that our trust in God is not dependent on immediate results, but on our confidence in His character and promises. Lastly, patience in waiting fosters gratitude. When we wait patiently on God, we begin to see His hand in the small things, the daily provisions, and the subtle ways He is moving in our lives. We become more attuned to His presence and more thankful for His care, even in the midst of waiting. This gratitude transforms our perspective, allowing us to see the waiting period not as a burden, but as a blessing, a time where God is drawing us closer to Him and preparing us for the fulfillment of His promises. Patience in waiting is about trusting God's process, knowing that He is always at work, even when we cannot see it. It is about holding on to His promises with confidence, knowing that what He has started in our lives, He will surely bring to completion in His perfect time. Letting go of fear is an essential step in fully trusting God and embracing the life He has planned for us. Fear is a powerful emotion that can paralyze us, keeping us from moving forward in faith. It clouds our judgment, distorts our perception of reality, and often makes situations seem far worse than they are. Fear thrives on uncertainty, feeds on the unknown and the what-ifs that plague our minds. However, to live a life of faith and trust in God, we must learn to release that fear and replace it with confidence in Him. Fear often stems from a lack of control or the inability to predict the future. As human beings, we naturally want to know what lies ahead, to plan and prepare for every possibility. Yet, life is unpredictable, and no matter how much we plan, there will always be elements beyond our control. This is where fear creeps in, whispering doubts and worst-case scenarios. But when we let go of fear, we acknowledge that while we may not control the future, we know the one who does. Letting go of fear involves a conscious decision to trust God's character and promises. The Bible repeatedly tells us, do not fear not, because there is nothing to be afraid of, but because God is with us. His presence is the antidote to fear. When we trust in His unfailing love, His power, and His wisdom, fear loses its grip on our hearts. We begin to understand that God is for us, not against us, and that He is working all things together for our good, even when circumstances seem daunting. Releasing fear also requires us to confront and challenge our fears directly. Often the fears we hold are based on lies or misconceptions, thoughts that magnify the negative and minimize God's ability to intervene. By bringing these fears into the light of God's truth, we can dismantle them. For instance, if you fear failure, remind yourself that God's love for you is not based on your performance but on His grace. If you fear the unknown, recall that God has promised to never leave you nor forsake you, guiding you every step of the way. Furthermore, letting go of fear allows us to embrace God's peace. Fear and peace cannot coexist. When we hold on to fear, we rob ourselves of the peace that God offers, a peace that transcends understanding and guards our hearts and minds. This peace comes from knowing that no matter what happens, God is in control, and He has a plan and a purpose for everything we face. By letting go of fear, we make room for this divine peace to fill our lives, providing calm in the midst of life's storms. Letting go of fear also frees us to live boldly and courageously. Fear keeps us small, limiting our actions and decisions. It holds us back from taking risks, from stepping out in faith, and from pursuing the dreams and purposes God has placed in our hearts. But when we release fear, we are empowered to move forward with confidence, knowing that God is with us and that He equips us for every challenge. We become free to live the abundant life that Jesus promised, unencumbered by the chains of fear. Additionally, letting go of fear strengthens our relationships with others. Fear often drives us to isolate ourselves, to put up walls to protect ourselves from potential hurt or rejection. However, when we trust in God's protection and provision, we can let go of these fears and engage more openly and authentically with those around us. We can love more fully, forgive more readily, and connect more deeply because we are not ruled by the fear of being hurt or let down. Finally, letting go of fear is a testimony to others of God's power and presence in our lives. When people see us walking in peace and confidence, even in difficult circumstances, it speaks volumes about the God we serve. It shows that our faith is not just theoretical but practical, impacting the way we live and respond to life's challenges. Our courage in the face of fear becomes a witness to others, drawing them to the same source of strength and peace that we have found in God. In essence, letting go of fear is about shifting our focus from the problems that surround us to the God who is above all. It's about choosing to believe that God's love casts out fear, and that His perfect plan will unfold in our lives regardless of the obstacles we face. When we let go of fear, we step into the freedom, peace, and joy that God intends for us, living fully in the confidence that He is with us, guiding us, and working all things together for our good. The contrast between God's wisdom and human understanding highlights the vast difference between divine insight and our limited perspective. Human understanding is inherently constrained by our finite experiences, knowledge, and reasoning. We rely on our senses, our intellect, and our accumulated knowledge to make sense of the world around us. While these tools are valuable, they are limited in scope and depth. Our understanding is shaped by our immediate context, our biases, and our personal experiences, often leading us to conclusions that might seem logical but are incomplete or flawed. In contrast, God's wisdom is boundless and perfect. It encompasses all of time, space, and existence. Where our understanding is fragmented and limited, God's wisdom is comprehensive and eternal. He sees the end from the beginning, understanding every nuance and intricacy of every situation. His wisdom is not confined by human limitations or constraints. It is informed by an infinite knowledge of the past, present, and future, allowing him to orchestrate events in ways that are beyond our comprehension. Human understanding often fails to account for the broader picture or the deeper purposes behind life's events. We may see only the surface, reacting to immediate circumstances and relying on our own logic. However, God's wisdom encompasses the full scope of his plans and purposes, integrating every detail into a coherent and purposeful whole. This means that what may seem confusing or unjust from our limited perspective is often part of a larger, divinely orchestrated plan that we may not fully grasp. God's wisdom also operates with an understanding of the human heart and the complexities of our motivations. While human understanding can be influenced by external factors and may not always discern true intentions, God's wisdom perceives the innermost thoughts and intentions of the heart. This allows him to guide and direct in ways that are not just rationally sound, but also deeply compassionate and aligned with our ultimate good. Moreover, God's wisdom is often counterintuitive to human reasoning. What seems like a paradox or a challenge to our logic might be a profound expression of divine wisdom. For instance, God's ways of achieving justice, mercy, and redemption may defy conventional expectations, such as the concept of sacrificial love being the pathway to ultimate victory. This divine wisdom invites us to trust beyond our immediate understanding, embracing the mystery and wonder of God's plans. Trusting in God's wisdom means acknowledging that our understanding is partial and that we need to rely on his perfect insight. It requires humility to admit that we do not have all the answers and that our perspective is limited. In moments of confusion or difficulty, turning to God for guidance allows us to align our decisions and actions with his greater wisdom. This trust is an act of faith that transcends our human limitations, opening us up to divine guidance that can lead us through life's complexities with assurance and peace. Ultimately, the contrast between human understanding and God's wisdom underscores the importance of seeking divine insight in all aspects of life. By recognizing the limitations of our own reasoning and trusting in the boundless wisdom of God, we position ourselves to experience his guidance, clarity, and direction. This trust is a testament to our faith in his perfect plan and his ability to lead us through the uncertainties of life with wisdom that surpasses all human understanding. The example of Jesus is a profound illustration of how divine wisdom and human understanding intersect in the most transformative ways. Jesus lived out the perfect model of trusting in God's wisdom while navigating the complexities of human existence. His life, teachings, and actions provide a template for how we can align our lives with divine principles, even when they challenge our limited human perspectives. Jesus' example reveals a life wholly submitted to God's will, marked by an unwavering trust in his Father's plan. From his birth to his resurrection, Jesus embodied obedience and faithfulness, demonstrating a deep reliance on God's wisdom every circumstance. His life was not governed by human expectations or conventional wisdom, but by a higher purpose that often defied conventional logic. Consider Jesus' approach to his mission. Despite being the Son of God, he did not seek worldly power, wealth, or influence. Instead, he embraced the path of humility, servanthood, and sacrifice. His teachings often overturned societal norms and religious traditions, offering radical concepts like loving one's enemies, forgiving those who wrong us, and finding greatness through service. These teachings were counterintuitive to human understanding, but revealed a divine wisdom that redefined the nature of power and success. Jesus' interactions with people further exemplify his alignment with divine wisdom. He reached out to the marginalized, the sinners, and the outcasts, demonstrating that God's love and grace extend beyond societal boundaries. His compassion and empathy were grounded in a deep understanding of human need and divine purpose. For example, his response to the woman caught in adultery was not one of condemnation, but of grace, illustrating how divine wisdom integrates justice with mercy. His teachings on faith and trust also provide a profound example. Jesus often spoke about the necessity of trusting in God's provision and guidance, using parables to illustrate these concepts. The story of the sparrows and lilies of the field is a powerful reminder of God's care and provision, showing that our anxiety and worry are unnecessary when we trust in a God who is attentive to our needs. The ultimate expression of Jesus' alignment with divine wisdom is seen in his sacrificial death on the cross. To the human eye, this act may have appeared as a tragic defeat, but from the perspective of divine wisdom, it was the culmination of God's redemptive plan for humanity. Through his death and resurrection, Jesus demonstrated that what seems like weakness or loss can be transformed into victory and restoration. This profound truth challenges our human understanding and invites us to embrace a higher perspective. Jesus' example encourages us to live with a similar trust in God's wisdom. It calls us to follow his model of humility, service, and obedience, even when it leads us to places that seem contrary to our desires or logic. By emulating Jesus' life, we learn to align our actions with divine principles, seeking God's guidance and trusting his plan, even when it diverges from our expectations. Moreover, Jesus' life serves as a constant reminder that divine wisdom often operates in ways that transcend human understanding. His example teaches us that embracing God's wisdom involves surrendering our own limited perspectives and embracing a faith that trusts in his greater plan. In doing so, we find a path that leads to true fulfillment, purpose, and connection with God's ultimate vision for our lives. In essence, the example of Jesus embodies the intersection of divine wisdom and human experience, offering a model for how we can live in alignment with God's will. His life demonstrates that true wisdom is not about adhering to human logic, but about trusting in and living out the divine principles that shape our journey. Through his example, we are invited to embrace a higher understanding, one that leads to a deeper relationship with God and a more profound expression of his love and purpose in our lives. Prayer as a tool of surrender is a deeply transformative practice that allows us to align our hearts with God's will and release control over our own desires and plans. Through prayer, we engage in a dialogue with God, opening ourselves to his guidance and expressing our trust in his sovereignty. This act of surrender through prayer is not merely about asking for things or seeking answers, but about cultivating a posture of openness, humility, and complete reliance on God. When we pray as a tool of surrender, we begin by acknowledging our limitations and our need for God's intervention. It involves coming before God with a heart that is willing to let go of our own agendas and preferences and instead seek his guidance and wisdom. This form of prayer is characterized by a deep recognition that while we may have plans and desires, God's plans are infinitely better and more aligned with his ultimate purposes. In the act of surrendering through prayer, we also practice releasing our anxieties and fears. When we bring our concerns before God, we are entrusting him with the burdens that we often carry alone. This act of casting our cares on him allows us to experience a profound sense of peace and freedom from the pressures of trying to control outcomes. It is through this release that we find comfort in knowing that God is in control and that He is working on our behalf, even when we cannot see or understand the full picture. Prayer as a tool of surrender also involves seeking God's will above our own. It requires us to ask, not just for our needs and desires, but for His will to be done in our lives. This means praying with a heart that is open to His direction, ready to accept His answers, even if they differ from what we had hoped for. This form of prayer is about aligning our will with God's and being willing to follow His lead, even when it requires change or sacrifice on our part. Additionally, surrendering through prayer means trusting God's timing. It can be challenging to wait for answers or for circumstances to unfold according to His schedule. Prayer helps us to practice patience and trust, recognizing that God's timing is perfect and that His delays are not denials but part of His larger plan. Through prayer, we express our trust that God knows the best timing for everything and that His delays are opportunities for us to grow in faith and dependence on Him. Moreover, prayer as a tool of surrender fosters a deeper intimacy with God. As we continually bring our thoughts, emotions, and decisions before Him, we cultivate a closer relationship with our Creator. This ongoing communication strengthens our connection with God and deepens our understanding of His character. It becomes a space where we can hear His voice, receive His guidance, and feel His presence, reinforcing our trust and dependence on Him. In surrendering through prayer, we also become more attuned to God's voice and His leading. It is through consistent prayer that we learn to discern His will and recognize the subtle ways He communicates with us. This heightened sensitivity allows us to follow His guidance more closely and to act in alignment with His purposes. Ultimately, prayer as a tool of surrender transforms our approach to life's challenges and decisions. It shifts our focus from self-reliance to divine dependence, from our own understanding to God's wisdom. This transformation empowers us to navigate life's uncertainties with grace and confidence, knowing that we are supported by a loving and all-knowing God who is guiding us every step of the way. Through prayer, we continually place our trust in God's hands, embracing a life that is characterized by surrender, faith, and a deep sense of peace. This practice not only changes the way we approach our daily lives, but also shapes our overall spiritual journey, drawing us closer to God and aligning us with His perfect will. Peace beyond understanding is a profound and transformative experience that transcends the typical grasp of human reasoning and emotions. This type of peace is not merely the absence of conflict or the result of favorable circumstances, but is a deep, enduring calm that remains steadfast regardless of external conditions. This peace surpasses human understanding because it does not rely on the predictability or stability of life's circumstances. In a world where stress, anxiety, and uncertainty are prevalent, this peace stands out as a remarkable and supernatural quality. It is a peace that is not contingent on the absence of problems, but exists even amidst the storms and trials of life. This peace is rooted in a profound trust in God's sovereignty and goodness. It comes from the assurance that God is in control of all things and that His purposes are always for our good. Even when situations are dire or when outcomes are uncertain, this peace remains because it is anchored in the certainty of God's character and promises. It is a peace that acknowledges the reality of life's challenges but chooses to focus on the unchanging nature of God's love and faithfulness. Experiencing peace beyond understanding involves a shift from relying on our own strength and wisdom to depending on God's provision and guidance. It is a peace that grows from a deep-seated faith that is working in all situations, even when we cannot see or comprehend how. This trust allows us to release our anxieties and fears, knowing that God's wisdom far surpasses our own understanding. Furthermore, peace beyond understanding is not a passive resignation to fate, but an active engagement with God's promises and presence. It is a peace that empowers us to face life's difficulties with courage and hope. It enables us to remain calm and resilient in the face of adversity, because we are anchored in the belief that God is with us and that He is working all things together for our good. This peace also has a transformative effect on our interactions with others. When we are filled with this peace, it radiates from us, influencing those around us. It becomes a source of strength and comfort to others who may be struggling, providing a living testimony of the profound impact of God's peace. It draws others to seek the same source of serenity and assurance that we have found in our relationship with God. Moreover, peace beyond understanding has a profound impact on our own well-being. It mitigates stress and anxiety, contributing to emotional and psychological health. This peace is a form of divine intervention that calms our minds and hearts, allowing us to navigate challenges with a sense of stability and clarity. It fosters a sense of well-being that is not dependent on external factors, but is grounded in the eternal and unchanging nature of God's presence. Ultimately, this peace is a gift that is experienced through a deep personal relationship with God. It is cultivated through prayer, trust, and an intimate knowledge of His character. It is a peace that defies logic and reasoning, a calm assurance that transcends human understanding, and a reflection of the profound assurance that comes from knowing and trusting in the infinite wisdom and love of God. Testimonies of divine intervention are powerful narratives that illustrate the profound ways in which God intervenes in human lives, often in ways that transcend natural explanation. These stories serve as compelling evidence of God's active presence and involvement in the world, showcasing His ability to work beyond human capabilities and understanding. Such testimonies often highlight instances where individuals find themselves in situations that seem impossible or insurmountable, only to experience a resolution or breakthrough that defies logical explanation. These moments are marked by a sense of divine timing and guidance, where what seemed like a desperate situation is met with an unexpected solution or a miraculous turn of events. These stories reflect a reality where God's intervention is evident, demonstrating His power to influence and transform circumstances in ways that go beyond natural possibilities. One common theme in testimonies of divine intervention is the experience of unexpected provision. Individuals who have faced financial hardship, for instance, might recount how their needs were met in ways that seemed improbable or miraculous. Whether through an unexpected gift, an unanticipated opportunity, or a sudden change in circumstances, these stories reveal how God provides for needs in ways that surpass human understanding. Such testimonies not only affirm the faith of those who experience them, but also inspire others to trust in God's provision and faithfulness. Another powerful aspect of divine intervention is the healing of physical or emotional ailments. Stories of miraculous healings, where individuals recover from serious illnesses or injuries against all medical expectations, highlight the extraordinary nature of God's intervention. These testimonies often emphasize the role of prayer, faith, and God's presence in the healing process, showcasing how divine intervention can bring about restoration and wholeness in situations deemed hopeless by human standards. Divine intervention also manifests in the form of protection and deliverance from danger. Testimonies often recount situations where individuals are spared from harm or disaster in ways that seem to defy natural explanations. These stories might involve accidents, natural disasters, or personal threats where individuals experience a sense of miraculous protection or escape. Such testimonies underscore the belief that God's protective hand is at work, guiding and safeguarding individuals from harm in ways that transcend human capability. In addition, divine intervention can be seen in the transformation of lives and circumstances. Testimonies of personal change often involve dramatic shifts in behavior, attitudes, or life direction as a result of a profound encounter with God. These stories reflect how divine intervention can lead to redemption, reconciliation, and new beginnings, illustrating the transformative power of God's influence in personal and relational contexts. Furthermore, testimonies of divine intervention often emphasize the impact on faith and spiritual growth. Experiencing a divine intervention can lead to a deepened sense of trust, reliance, and intimacy with God. These stories often describe how individuals' faith is strengthened and their relationship with God is enriched as a result of witnessing His active involvement in their lives. Such experiences not only affirm God's presence and power, but also encourage others to seek and trust in His intervention. Ultimately, these testimonies serve as a powerful reminder of the reality of divine intervention. They offer tangible evidence of God's active presence in the world, revealing how He works in extraordinary ways to influence, guide, and transform lives. Each story is a testament to the fact that, despite the limitations of human understanding and capability, God's intervening about outcomes that are beyond natural explanation, affirming His power, love, and faithfulness. In conclusion, embracing the reality of divine intervention offers you a profound hope and reassurance. Through trust in God's sovereignty, surrendering our will, and letting go of fear, we open ourselves to experiencing a peace that surpasses all understanding. This peace is not a passive state, but a dynamic assurance rooted in God's infinite wisdom and perfect timing. As we align our lives with His divine will through prayer and surrender, we discover a deeper connection with His purpose for us, and we witness His transformative work in our lives. The testimonies of divine intervention provide tangible evidence of God's active role in our world. These stories of miraculous provision, healing, protection, and personal transformation are powerful reminders of His presence and power. They challenge us to step beyond our own understanding and embrace a faith that trusts in the extraordinary ways God moves and acts. As we reflect on these truths, let us remember that divine intervention is not just a distant concept, but a living reality that we can experience every day. It is an invitation to live with a profound sense of peace, trust, and expectancy. By surrendering to God's wisdom and allowing Him to guide our lives, we align ourselves with His greater plan and open ourselves to the incredible possibilities that come from His divine involvement. May we be encouraged by the testimonies of those who have experienced God's miraculous intervention and be inspired to seek His guidance and trust in His plans. Let us live with the confidence that, regardless of our circumstances, God is actively working in our lives, bringing about His purposes and demonstrating His unfailing love.